All right, so today we're going to go over the Pedigree Chart Lab. You all have a copy of this that I shared with you on Classroom. I know that there are some confusing aspects of pedigrees, so I decided to make a video to kind of help all of you who are not here in front of me understand the concepts and the terminology behind the pedigree. First things first, we're going to talk about the actual terms that are here because the terms and the symbols are really important in pedigree design. You need to understand that there is a standard way of designing a pedigree so that anybody can read it. So we'll start off with the symbols. Here we have circles representing female. So this is a female with the dominant trait, and this one would be a female with the recessive trait. Now, sometimes you'll see those switch so that the dominant trait is filled in and the recessive trait is clear. It just depends on, who's doing the pedigree, but it has to be indicated by some sort of notation. Okay, so you'll see a key with most pedigrees. Well, they'll put a legend there so you can tell what the different shapes and colors mean. So sometimes this varies, but in the beginning here, we're going to talk about it as dominant trait being clear and filled in being having the recessive trait. So females are circles. That means that males are going to be squares. So I'm going to put in a male with a dominant trait will just be a box, and a male with a recessive trait, according to our terminology that we're using for this one, is a filled-in box. Okay? So there's our male with a dominant trait, male with a recessive trait. Over here shows horizontal line connecting male and female, and it says for marriage. It's not marriage. Not all organisms that we use for pedigrees marry. Dogs don't marry. Sheep don't marry. But we use pedigrees to kind of understand their genetics. So this more accurately should say mating. Okay. Now I'm not expecting you guys to change that. Just understand. So this means a mating between two, a female with the dominant trait and a male with the dominant trait. Over here, we can add in the vertical line. So you would have something like this. The vertical line going down represents an offspring, at least one. In this case, it would be a single one because the line doesn't branch. Over here, you see the line come down and branch to two other vertical lines. This here means two offspring from these parents. Twins represent an interesting change to the pedigree because twins come down off the pedigree. I'll do it on the other side. Twins come off the pedigree with a V-shaped line. So if we had a set of twin boys, it would look like that. Okay. That being said, we can look at the actual activity part of this. Now, this one is kind of a demonstration for you so that you can get some practice working with this before you get to the end of the lab where there's the actual challenge that is kind of interesting and not terribly easy, but that's okay. So I filled in some of this for you. In looking at this right here, we're looking at brown and blue, okay, brown being dominant, blue being recessive. What we know based on this is that in order to have blue eyes, this person right here has to have lowercase b as their genotype. So it's not possible for number 2, that would be number 2, by the way, because the numbers got screwed up, 2 and 1. It would not be possible for number 2 to be a heterozygote because if they were, they would have brown eyes. The one problem we have from this cross, though, is that when you're looking at this one, you can't tell based on this table whether it's capital B or capital B lowercase b. So that's what goes right here. We know they have brown eyes because they've got a clear circle. So we know that the brown trait is present in this individual, but we're not sure which way the genotype works out for this. The only way to tell this is to do a test cross and see what their offspring would be. But in this case, there is no test cross. It's just a practice. So in order for this person to have brown eyes, they have to have at least one capital B, but they could also have 2. So there's 2 possible types for the genotype. Down here, number 3, we're again looking at brown eyes and blue eyes. But if you look at the way this is done, notice I said earlier, sometimes the legend is a little different. I've already kind of screwed this up. So in looking at this, I have to go back up here and change this because I wasn't paying attention. Oops. I wasn't paying attention to what this legend down here said. So there's something for you guys to take note of. Sometimes even your teacher doesn't read. So this one here actually would have to be lowercase b. And this one, number 2, so these are all wrong. That'll teach me to not read. This one could either be capital B, or capital B, lowercase b. So I've got to switch these. All of this is wrong over here because I failed to read the thing, and I just was using the scheme from up above, and I didn't look at the legend until just now. So I'm glad I caught that. It's a good thing to take note of when you're doing these. Look at the legend before you start. So we know number 1 has blue eyes, and then their genotype is little b, okay? And we know here, this should say brown, and it's either big B, or big B, little b, okay? Now, down at the bottom, we've got a couple more pieces of evidence from a different cross. So this is not related to this one up here. We could have connected this to this, but it's not the way this is set up. So we know one thing. Number 3 has brown eyes. We know number 5 has brown eyes. We know number 4 has blue eyes. So we can fill in our chart over here. So again, we know number 3 has our brown eyes, right? Because that's our dominant allele. We know number 5 has brown. And we know number 4 is blue. Okay? The only possible way to get blue eyes is lowercase b, and there are 2 possible ways to get brown, capital B, lowercase b, or capital B. Now, the thing about that is, if this is capital B, there's only capital B that can be passed on to the next generation. If it's capital B, lowercase b, it's either capital B or lowercase b, but we know that number 5 has to be capital B, lowercase b, because number 4 has just lowercase b. So these 2 alleles get separated from one another during meiosis. So this individual has either this one or this one, but not both. So we know this is a heterozygote from looking at our pedigree. So you can learn a lot from a pedigree just by, knowing how to work it. So on we go to the questions. And here it just kind of says what I just went through with you. What we know is this. If we were looking at this and trying to do Punnett squares of this, if we had this as the one parent and this is the other, what we know is that 100% of offspring from this cross would be heterozygous, but they all have brown eyes. So, could that be the result of this cross right here? Yes, absolutely. Could this pedigree right, or this Punnett square right here represent this mating? Yes. We are not sure yet, though, because there's only one offspring, so it's really not possible to tell which one is actually, at work for this. Because if you look at this, if we take capital B, and cross it with lowercase b, you only have a capital B in 2 of these boxes, okay? In these 2 boxes, you have 2 lowercase b's. So in this case, you're going to have 50% capital B, lowercase b, and then 50% lowercase b. This would be brown again, but this one would be blue. So this is a little bit of a challenge in that we don't really know the genotypes of those parents up there in that cross. So down here, things are a little bit different. Hopefully, from the demonstration I just gave, you're able to figure some of this stuff out. I'm going to let it let you work on it. If you have questions, send me an email, jump on a Google Meet, and I'll talk to you when I see you in person.